So we're going to have two presentations today. First will be Susheel talking about static analysis tools, and then followed by Mitch from Simple Nexus, who will talk about Flutter. And if you haven't heard of that, that's Google's cross-platform SDK. So go ahead.
All right, thank you, Brian. So I hope you're all doing well today. You got some pizza? I promised myself I wouldn't do this, but I want to start with a dad joke. Oh no. Anyway, so it goes like this. So I deleted all my German contacts from my phone. My phone is now hands-free. Thought I would get a standing ovation because it was a phone-related joke, but that's okay. So today I'm going to talk about static analysis tools. Who here has used any static analysis tools? So a few people already know what I'm talking about. Okay. So I want to talk about static analysis tools specifically for Android development using Kotlin. So let's get started. So we all know that Kotlin is a statically typed language, and by that, what it means is that the compiler at compile time knows or requires us to specify the type of variables. With Kotlin, there's some flexibilities, like if you were to say val a equals tree or something like that, the compiler infers the type. So there's some flexibility, but for the most part, it's still it's somewhat strictly typed. So what's the meaning of static analysis then? So static analysis, also called static code analysis, is the method of debugging, computer program debugging that is done by examining the code without executing the program. And by that, I mean, before you hit run after writing your code, if you want to perform analysis on your code to get feedback for how you're writing your code, how your code is organized, that's when we use static analysis. So why may we be doing this? What's the purpose of doing this? So this was actually a very pragmatic approach for us. It was kind of like needed, situational based. A few months ago, there was a business requirement for us where we had to work with another team on the same code base. So we had two teams contributing to the same code base. So this meant that people that are used to different styles of working would have to work together. So there were a lot of things to address. But we started with coming up with some common rules, common coding styles to address issues in like pull requests or code styles or things like that. So in this talk, I'm going to talk about three mostly commonly used static analysis tools. They are KT-lint, Android lint, and detect. So I'm going to talk about how to set up, how to install them, what they provide, what are the benefits, drawbacks, pros, and cons. So I talked about static analysis. So at Ancestry, we set up KT-lint, Android lint, and detect, as I talked about. So what is KT-lint? KT-lint, even though it has the word lint in it, it's really not a lint tool. It doesn't do any real static analysis, but it's a formatting tool. So it's also specifically just for Kotlin. So if you have interoperability or any kind of legacy code that's written in Java, your KT-lint will only look at the Kotlin code, not at the Java code. You can still use some kind of code style checks for that purpose. So another feature of KT-lint is you don't have to do any kind of special configuration. It's a matter of just getting KT-lint using some command line tools. And then it also has its own built-in formatter. And what I mean by that is the guidelines and the rules that dictate how KT-lint works is being taken care of by KT-lint. So you don't have to go and specify for instance, what the indentation should be or what the spacing should be. That's all taken care of by KT-lint. And customizable output. So once you run KT-lint, the output generated can be customized in XML or HTML formats. I'll show you screenshots of what it looks like just in the next slides.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So with KT length, like you were saying, it all comes kind of pre-built in the configuration.
Mm-hmm.
What if I wanted to like modify it? What if I like disagreed with something that KT was doing? Is there a way to change it or?
So with KT-lint, no, but there are other tools
So KT
which are
length.
configurable.
So what configuration does it use then? Where does it come from?
I was going to talk about it.
Okay, I'll wait then. I'll wait.
Great
Sorry.
question. So these are the steps to get KT-lint. People that are fans of command line, I'm not, but you can be, that's fine. Just do it using the brew command, or you can get the Gradle version. There's also a Gradle plugin version. This is by far my favorite, because I love Gradle plugins. They're easy to set up. So when I said no configuration needed, no decisions to make, what I meant was, and this is to answer your question, so KT-lint automatically fetches what the rules are from kotlinlang.org and from Android Kotlin style guide. So the rules are dictated by them. So that way, if you and I were working on the same code base, it wouldn't be up to just you or me to decide what the formatting should be, what the rules should be. Feel free to ask any questions. It's interactive. So when I said formatting rules, these are the type of formatting rules: indentation, spacings, wildcard, consistent order of modifiers. If you're using, let's say, strings, just make sure that you're declaring all strings at one place and stuff like that. So the biggest advantage that KT-lint offers is it has built-in formatting, which means it fixes your errors automatically. So let's say after running KT-lint, you discovered some errors, some formatting errors. KT-lint tries to fix them automatically for you. And in the next slide, I'll show you. No, not this one. Dang. All right, here. After running KT-lint using the Gradle command, that's the sample output right there, where it says format Kotlin main. It's able to fix some, but some it can't, and it'll tell you where it can't. I haven't figured out why the reasons when it fails and when it doesn't. When it does, I just go and manually fix them. Brian, you're smiling.
Your Kotlin plugin update.
Yeah? Oh, because I took a screenshot. I know, right? So that's KT-lint. So the next one I want to talk about is Android lint. So Android lint has existed since the Eclipse days.
Go back for a second.
Okay, sure.
You said it pulls from Google's.
Not Google. Kotlinlang.org and Android.
The other one is Android.
Android Kotlin.
Isn't that specific? Isn't that the Android the definition not specifically for Google's?
Probably.
Which, because I think it says in there like this is some things that are from Google and for Google for their particular reasons. So it might not necessarily apply to you. And if I remember correctly, that's the right repo. It says that on their main page.
So the interesting one, the Android style guide, they do a lot of really crazy things like little M's.
Yeah.
And Hungarian notation, whereas when Jake Wharton went in, because he was hired specifically to write that,
Yeah.
he basically said, this is how I do it, this is how Google's going to do it from here on out. This is a recommended approach, and he's done some pretty decent job with the formatting.
I haven't looked at them in about a year, so.
Yeah, it looks a lot better than what it used to be. I think there's still the disclaimer, but I think it's just a generic disclaimer that's
Yeah,
on everything.
I think they have stuff like there's like 100 characters wide lines. I'm like, that's really narrow.
Yeah.
And that was so it would fit under a big bug tracker or something like that. So, okay.
Awesome. So the next one I wanted to talk about was Android lint. So Android lint actually does some static analysis. We talked about KT-lint, how it just does formatting checks. So if you remember back, before showing you a screenshot, I want to just talk about what Android lint is again. It's a scanning tool provided by Android Studio, which shows you, hey, this is, which shows you code quality issues along with severity message. It also has a descriptive, it has a descriptive message and a severity level along with it. So this screenshot, I got it from Eclipse. Who remembers from Eclipse days when they saw lint issues? People that did Android using ADT?
Yeah.
Yeah. So who remembers fixing every issue? Me neither. No. So there's some accessibility, contents description. This is the most favorite one. Nobody likes to fix this. We're trying to do that here. So how do you run it? How do you get Android Lint? Well, it comes with Android Studio. So you don't have to get it separately. And the commands to run it on Windows and Mac, they're outlined over there. And once you run it, what is the sample output? That's what it looks like. You can customize your reports, just like KT-Lint. You can generate an HTML or an XML report. I do also want to mention that Android Lint is constantly running in the background. So at compile time, you'll be able to know when you run the app, you'll be able to see, without explicitly running the command line here, the Gradle command here, you'll be able to see the severities and the warnings. So Android Lint also has the special command for specific build types. So if you had just a debug build and you want to run Lint only on your debug build, you have a specific command. Let's say you wanted to run a Lint check just for a specific module, you can do that too. And that way it's compatible. So how does Android Lint work behind the scenes? So in this block diagram, you can see there's app source files, there's the lint.xml, and there's the lint tool itself. So app source files are your Java classes, your Kotlin classes, your XML layout files. And lint.xml is where all the lint rules are, the rules that govern when the lint check should fail and pass. And here, these are the type of issues that Lint catches: correctness, usability, security, accessibility, that people sometimes care about, performance, and there's L18N, which is basically like an internationalization or localization kind of a check. Yeah. So what if you wanted to configure your Lint checks? You asked about configuration in KT-Lint, but it doesn't have too many options. So let me talk about how we can configure our Lint checks. So if you remember from the block diagram, there was a lint.xml file. This is where you'd specify which preferences you want, for what checks you want in the lint.xml file. As you see in the sample file, I have the icon missing density folder error, and the severity I can mention it as ignore, and this error doesn't pop up anymore. Or I can say, hey, make this error an error, which means the build will fail. So this is where I would place my preferences for lint checks in the lint.xml. So what if you're already working on a huge project and like all of a sudden you wanted to use Android Lint and you want a clean build because you want to add Android Lint to your CI. So does that mean you have to solve all the existing problems before before you move on and start using Android Lint in your CI? There's a solution for that. You don't have to fix everything. You can just create a baseline. So you can get a snapshot of where your project is at currently, and basically you can whitelist all of the current existing Lint checks. And this is how you do it. You put this block of code in your project's root build.gradle, and then you can just move on and work only on newly created Lint bugs. And then the last tool I want to talk about is detect. This is also another static analysis tool. It uses what they call abstract syntax tree provided by the Kotlin compiler. For the purpose of this talk, let's just say that detect uses this tree to go through each and every Kotlin file in your source code and then performs analysis on it and reports it. So what are the features of detect? Code smell analysis, complexity report. It's highly configurable like Android Lint, and it specifies code smell threshold, which means you can tell it, hey, if you find 5 issues, don't break the build, but if you find 10, you should break the build. stuff like that. It also comes with a Gradle plugin, which is my favorite. So how do you get detect? You can either do command line or Gradle. You can just go to that link for detailed instructions. It's just homebrew for command line. And if you're doing it through Gradle, the instructions will be on that link that I sent you, that I put up there. But I would personally recommend using the IntelliJ plugin. If you go to that website and download the plugin, and then I have a graphic there which shows how to enable the plugin in Android Studio. The advantage of using the plugin is that the plugin will constantly run in the background as you're coding, and you can see that detect is raising issues. You don't have to wait and run the detect command. So this is what I would recommend. So what kind of code smell analysis does it perform? So once you run the check, it talks about bugs, complexity, naming, performance, and styling. Bugs like if you're not casting properly, or if you have unreachable code, like code after writing a return statement or something like that. And complexity, like if you remember or follow Solid Principles by Uncle Bob, the first principle, the single responsibility principle, talks about how each method or each class should try and do one thing, even though one thing is a little bit subjective. Having objective tools, having tools that give you objective analysis can be really helpful. So detect will tell you complexity by using a parameter called McCabe complexity. So McCabe is just named after the guy that came up with it. It's like an objective measure of how complex your code is. And then package naming and function naming for naming styles, more for consistency within the project. And then performance and style.
When you say performance like Big O performance, or?
Performance like, I haven't seen, so when I ran detect for performance, it'll only tell, hey, you're using a for loop when you should be using, you're using a for each when you should be using for, or something like that. So if you run detect, this is the sample output. If you read over there, I don't know how many of you can read. Is it too small? Is it too small?
It's too small.
Oh man, okay. Well, anyway, I can read it for you, and I can share the slides later. So it says complexity, too many functions, nested block depth, along with where the file is, complex condition, nested block depth. So it tells you like what rule you're breaking, and it also tells you over there how many lines of code it analyzed. And like I said, McCabe complexity, and how many code smells it found. You can also specify threshold, like I said, for when you want your break to build to break. Like some issues may not warrant like breaking the build. So, so can you extend detect? Is it configurable? The answer is yes. You can write your own custom rule. So let's say you wanted to write a custom rule for determining what should have, how a function should be named. All you have to do is extend the rule class, which comes from detect core API, and then you can just give it a pattern, so regex, and then you can override from the rule base class the visit named function method. It follows a visitor pattern, and because we have access to the AST, the abstract syntax tree, from the Kotlin compiler, which goes through each and every file, you're able to get the function over there, and then you can use your regex to see if the condition passes or not. So that's how you would write a custom rule. So to summarize and compare KT-lint, Android lint, and detect, KT-lint requires no setup. It's just a matter of getting it from the link that I showed you from their website. And the advantages are it fixes errors automatically when it can. Sometimes it can't, as you saw. But it doesn't perform any static analysis, even though they have the word lint in it. It's kind of weird. Coming to Android lint, it works for Java, Kotlin, XML also. like the accessibility issue that I talked about. Like in an image view, if you don't give it a content description, how it shows up even in XML. It's also highly configurable. It has the baseline XML file, like I talked about, which tells you, which you tell Android lint, saying, hey, just whitelist all of these files and just perform analysis on everything else. And then finally, detect, which works specifically for Kotlin, and it performs a detailed static analysis. You saw a screenshot of the report. I forgot to mention one thing. You can also do the baseline thing for detect also, just like Kotlin, just like Android lint. You can whitelist whatever files you want. So let's say you whitelisted a file in the past, but you're having to touch the file again because you have to add feature or something like that in a whitelisted file. And if it breaks something, you have to either run the baseline check again or fix all the issues that were previously whitelisted in order to move forward. And one additional thing with detect is it can be used along with KT-lint. So it provides a wrapper around KT-lint. Well, that's about it. Who has questions?
So what's the difference between KT-lint and Android Studios, just like styling? Because you can turn on, so whenever you commit, it'll go through and style everything according to your style guide, do all the fixes that way.
Actually, I don't think there's a ton of difference anymore.
You could do it in your CI/CD server to verify that everyone's doing that. That would be the benefit there.
I think that style guide came out later, right? After KT-lint? Or did it come before?
Well, that feature's been in IntelliJ for
A long time. But there's a button particularly that says, hey, go get it from Kotlin.
yeah, so you don't touch the Kotlin one.
So IntelliJ doesn't do that by default, right?
No, see, there's a thing you can check when you're committing
Yeah.
to just automatically format. That way you can work in your own style, but it goes into the repository for everyone else, which I don't recommend doing. But you can.
Cool. Any more questions?
So if you have like KT-lint and detect, I mean, is there any benefit of running both, or is it, wow, let's just use detect? I mean, how would I make that choice? Like, when do I use both, or one or the other?
At this point, I would say KT-lint's advantage is just that it fixes things automatically. With detect, you have to go and manually fix them.
They target different things. So KT-lint is just purely about style. It's like check styles in Java. Whereas detect is similar to Sonar and SonarQube. And so it's going through, it's checking for how deeply nested you made your if tree. How many loops did you have? It's looking for other code smell things like that. And so they cover two different areas. So you would actually want to use both. You may choose not to use KT-lint because you don't like the Google style guide. You're vehemently opposed to anything Jake working, so you don't want to use his stuff. So you wouldn't use KT-lint, but you would still use detect because it's covering a different set of problems.
Yeah, KT-lint is formatting and detect is static analysis. Any other questions? Anyone else?
Does detect work on annotations? Like with Android lint, you can suppress certain warnings saying, hey, this isn't really an issue, and you can use the same annotations with detect.
I haven't tried them. I've always tried to fix them, Jordan.
There's some times where you have like 4 or 5 nested things and you just don't want to touch it, or you don't really need to touch it, or I'm specifically doing something bad because it's how you did it in the old Android versions. I still have to support that, but I have a checker around for the new versions.
I don't know the answer. I've just whitelisted files in the past, but I haven't suppressed anything. Does anyone know the answer? No, we can find out maybe. Good question. Anyone else? No? Okay, well, thank you for listening to me.
So before we hear from Mitch as he gets set up, again, he'll be talking about Flutter, if you've forgotten the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Everybody, please make sure that you've signed in. This is for security and so that you'll be in the drawing afterwards to get the stuff that's on the table. So.
All right. So before I start, a little background about me. I'm Mitch Giles. I currently work at Simple Nexus. I worked there about 6 months doing Android dev and software QA. Fun fact, almost a year ago next month actually was my first time coming to this meetup. So it's kind of fun that almost a year later I now get to present. Excited to be here. A little bit more, I am self-taught relatively. So if I over-explain something or don't explain something, please forgive me. My learning style is different. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Flutter and Dart. Dart because that's what Flutter is built on. So there's a widget for that. So what is Flutter? Flutter is a cross-platform mobile UI framework. Pretty heavy emphasis on that on the UI part. I'll get to that later. It's written in Dart and it's based upon concepts of widgets, screens, and routes. Widgets being the building blocks, screens being built of widgets, and routes being how you get to different screens. And then why Flutter? Flutter is pretty cool. It works inside existing code bases through what's called modules. I won't be covering that right now, but it's kind of cool. I'll be talking mainly about the app side of things. It's free and open source. It's made by Google. It's backed pretty heavily inside Google. And like at Google I/O last year, anything that was like UI related other than talks about constraint layout and motion layout and all those usually involve Flutter. If it talked about material, it talked about Flutter. It has support for material design components and Cupertino design components, which means when you write your app, it can look native and feel like it's actually part of the system, unlike other cross-platform apps. And then it has native performance. It's going to compile down to ARM code. It's going to run usually at 60 frames per second, but it's going to look smooth. And then has hot reload, which when it works, it's awesome. Pressing a button and 2 seconds later, not even 2 seconds, like half a second, seeing the change on the device, it makes it really easy. I have run into issues with that where I'll have to kill the app and rerun it because sometimes it doesn't catch my changes. So a brief intro into Dart. Dart is kind of like a Java++. It's not quite as nice as Kotlin, but it has some benefits. It supports something called just-in-time compilation and ahead-of-time compilation. This just-in-time compilation is what allows for hot reload. So with all the talk of people wanting Flutter to support Kotlin, if that happens, most likely hot reload might not work too well. And then ahead-of-time compilation, just meaning it compiles down to ARM code for native. And then in Dart, basically everything is an object. A variable, that's an object. Function is an object. Everything is an object, which is nice. And the default of all variables and objects, it can be nice, is null, which is pretty useful. So like ints can be null. It is strongly typed, but it can infer types still. So kind of like Kotlin. And then supports generic and dynamic types. So you can easily put list int or list dynamic and have it multiple different types of variables if you do not dynamic. And then unlike Java, it doesn't have keywords, public, protected, and private. But to declare something private, you use an underscore in front of it. And then probably one of the biggest downsides to me is it ends in a semicolon. And I always was forgetting that, but it always gives you that nice little red squiggly line letting you know you missed it. But it's easy to catch. And then just like Java and Kotlin, all Dart apps or Flutter apps have a main function as the entry point. So this is an example of what a function looks like. So you have the return type on the left, and then just your normal like Java style. You'll notice in here you have that squiggly, the curly braces. That means, like that, you can set it as, what's the name I'm looking for? As a preset value.
Like a default.
Default,
Yeah.
that's the word. Thank you. Value, and then, or you can not have a return type, and you can simplify it down to one line, which is pretty nice. And then to call it, you can specify the name of it if it's a default value. Variables, you can declare the type, such as here with string, or leave it off with input var. Yeah, same with ints. And then you can declare an int without putting value and just have it be null. And then const and final, or you can apply to any of the variables. Collections, you have your lists or arrays, and then you have sets and maps, and they work pretty similar to how they do in other languages. The recap of Dart for me just helped me understand Flutter and be able to read it a little bit better. Yes.
The const that you showed, is that reference-based or value-based constant?
Good question. I think it is reference, but I am not 100% certain. Also, I'm going to go back. You're going to see this style a lot in Flutter, having values, because with Flutter, when it's going to be like a bunch of nested functions, and you don't always have to declare each parameter in it. So you're going to see that a lot. Yeah, so the const, yes, I think it's reference. Okay, intro to Flutter. In Flutter, almost everything can be classified as a widget. Text field, that's a widget. Padding is a widget. An inkwell, which is how you can click things, is a widget. I give a few examples here. And then a widget is basically similar to a view/view group in Android. It is a little bit different, but it can be things like into that. And a widget is going to have two types, stateful and stateless. I'm going to explain that shortly. Flutter uses things called routes for navigating to different screens. With navigation, you're generally going to push or pop. Navigation is kind of like you have a stack of stuff. And then screens, also known as pages, are a collection of those widgets. Basically, that would be an activity or a fragment in the Android world. Sizes in Flutter, so like in Android, we have DPI and DP and SP. There we go. In Flutter, we don't. We have what's called logical pixels, which aren't really, don't really have a, which are, here we go, which are also referred to as device-independent or resolution-independent pixels. And they correlate more to an actual size. So there's 38 logical pixels per centimeter. So I had to look that one up because I was curious. I was like, why am I out? Like I put 8.0 because it's usually a double. I'm like, okay, what exactly is that meaning? And I looked it up and that's what I found. So kind of interesting. Okay, so stateless and stateful widgets. So a state is basically information that can be read synchronously for the widget, and it defines how the widget is going to be built, and that state can change during the lifetime of the widget. Stateless widgets, those don't change. In order to change, they're going to have to be rebuilt. It's going to get expensive. Stateful widgets are mutable. They can change. You can change them dynamically. They depend on state and configuration of other widgets, and there's two categories in them, which I didn't really run into too much in this, but one will use emitting and disposing of the state, and another one uses just changing the state, setting the state. Okay, so up top left is kind of a generic kind of list view item. And here you can see how it's made of like a map, if you will, of all the different widgets that go into it. So the material is important because of the inkwell. And the inkwell makes it so you can tap it and it'll have splash to it when you click it. Padding for giving your spacing. The container to contain it all. The row specifies that it's going to be in a row of your icon and your text. And then this is what it looks like in the code. It can get pretty messy. But one thing that I've really enjoyed with Flutter is right here at the closing brackets and parentheses, it tells you what component it's closing. Yes.
Don't have that restriction.
Okay. No worries. Which is nice, but again, it can get pretty messy and confusing when you're going in there, adding and removing. So yeah. Which leads me, yes. Oh,
Sorry, I'm just
Kevin.
counting.
Yeah, it's, and this is just for that one like piece.
I think the linter would complain about this.
We'll just stay there.
Yeah. So, which leads me to like one of the big cons of Flutter is I would not use it for a big app. Flutter is perfect for smaller apps. If I'm a single developer wanting to hit both platforms, perfect. But once you start getting big, it can get really crazy. You can get a lot of this out into other classes. And I'll show you that a bit more.
What IDE do you use to make for Flutter?
You can use Android Studio and Visual.
And Video Studio.
Yeah. So I used Android Studio and it's nice. One kind of hiccup that I kept on running into, because I'm used to when in Android, just Control R, and it'll pop up your virtual device manager if you don't have one open, and you can select it. In Flutter, it doesn't. So you have to open up a virtual device and then run it, which was annoying sometimes. So these are the resources I used to learn Flutter. This Udacity course, I recommend. It went through pretty smoothly. They covered it very well. And then their docs are pretty amazing. Same with docs for Dart. I didn't have any troubles going through them. And before I move on to kind of that little sample app that I made for it, does anybody have any questions?
I do. How does it handle life cycle? Like
So-
how does it compare to a normal Android life cycle?
So you're going to use state for handling that. I haven't dived too much into how it like compares with that. But yeah, it can get messy sometimes.
What about like networking libraries or database libraries, kind of that lower level?
So it was difficult to find, to me it was pretty difficult to find some libraries that I could use. And there's not a lot of natively, like in Dart ones that I was finding. Like when I was searching for storing data, like a lot of people were just saying stored on a file. So I was like,
Tools tooling around Dart and Flutter, like build tools and stuff like that. So you can put on your CI/CD servers. Does it come with Gradle or something to that effect, or is it just scripts and the
So-
command line tools? Or
so it does compile, so I can show you. So like in your project directory, you are going to have your Android assets with Gradle and all that, and your iOS assets. So
No.
But then how do you go build that? I mean, when you want to ship this to, Circle CI or whatever to go build this, how does it work?
I haven't dived into that part
Okay.
yet. So
You just click and run in Android Studio and
Yeah.
it's good.
There's
For me,
the
that's
Focus Gradle and the Android.
yeah, like you have all of your Gradle stuff and your
So
iOS stuff,
So it's not a single build system, it's going to be an individual build system
to my knowledge.
for Android and one for iOS?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just all of the steps of that I haven't covered with going from Flutter into it. So, any other questions? So, this is a little to-do list app that I made using Flutter and Firebase, which if you couple Flutter with Firebase, it works wonders for your small projects, I think, because you can offload all of your stuff to Firebase if you like Firebase. Is that big enough, or should I make it bigger? There we go. Okay, so this is my main, which I just have it pointing at, which right here you can see it's a material app, and this is the title of it. And then,
Would you zoom in a little bit?
yes, I zoomed in on the other one, not this one. Okay, so you have your material app, and then we have this home, which is the task list page, as I call it. Which, if we go to task list, that might be definitely. So to walk through a little bit of this class, and this one is a stateful widget, and it's going to be calling for this task list page, which is down here, and it creates it right here. And in it, right here, I'm getting my Firebase information, and then it's going to build a list of tasks. And right here is where it's doing that, and it's running through the tasks and building a list item for each one. And right there is where it's building the item. This is my navigation function. So right here, navigator.push. That's where that push comes in. And so when I click on list item, it's going to take me to an edit page. And then here it's building this page itself.
So before you go on, what is the meaning of the underscore in front of like names?
Private. That makes it private.
Private, okay.
So this one is my line item. So here I have a set height and a border radius. And then here for when I click on, I'm going to have a tab in the bottom right for saving, and that's where it's going to do stuff. And then, actually no, sorry, this one takes you into the edit page. And then we have deleting the task, and then here it's going to build that line item, which it can get pretty big. But yes.
So I see a lot of hard-coded like 8.0, 100.
Yeah, you can. So you can put that into a theme, and you can have a theme back in your main.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you have one spot to change it.
Okay.
I just didn't go through and do that.
Will it support like different sizes depending on the device it's running on?
Yeah. Yes, you can set like landscape and different and all that, and you can actually come in here and have different, like if the device type's Android versus the device type's iOS, it can display differently if you wanted, and include different widgets. So if you notice back here on this task list page, you get list view. So I have this list view, which contains the list item. So the way you can make your code a little bit more readable is you break it out more. A common pattern that I've seen in a lot of Flutter is you'll have several classes on one file, and it gets really ugly, in my opinion. So it's kind of funny that earlier we were talking about code style and keeping things simple and clean, and then we have Flutter, which you can, and like I could go through and I could make this a lot simpler. Just takes effort, and it's really easy to make it just a mess.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
So in their build task list widgets, you have this children line there. At the end of the line, you have a comma, but I'm not understanding what the.
So in Flutter, the suggested style guide is inside any method call, which is like list view or where's another good example down here. So we have a scaffold and then an app bar, and you're going to see a comma after that, and it will actually auto put that in, and it's to make it so if you want to add more parameters, it's just super easy to.
And it's ignored by the compiler, I'm going to guess. It's just,
Yeah.
Okay.
It makes it easier to format IDE when it sees that. It'll format it nicer for
Yeah.
you. Without the comma, it doesn't auto-format as nicely.
Yeah,
You'll have
so
to manually do some format.
say I come in here and let's see if I can try and break it some so it gets ugly. Do some weird stuff. Okay. But when you're typing it in, they highly recommend that you do a short key to the formatter, which I did, and it just will auto format it into this style, which makes it a lot more readable. Otherwise, you're gonna have like weird like indentations, all that stuff. Yeah, so that comma is just denoting that there could be more after it. So here we have the line item, and it's going to have two texts properties to it. The title and then the priority of it. And here we have our edit screen. So with Flutter, there, you're not going to have to do any XML or anything. It's all going to be in this code itself, which can be nice. So this one is also, excuse me, stateful widget. And I even have down here init state. And here is where I have a fab button where it's going to update Firebase with the new task or change the task that you were editing and then go back to the screen.
I've got another question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So you have a map there. It's map of string dynamic. What exactly does dynamic mean? Does that mean it can be anything, or it can be a variety of things? Like I can put a string in there and an integer?
It means I could
So-
have a map of string and an int, string of a string.
So I can have one collection that can have a wide variety of types inside of it.
Yeah.
So it's like a string any map in Kotlin.
Which it's a nice one dealing with Firebase because you're going to have strings and strings, ints and strings, and all sorts of stuff. Yes.
Are you able to specify only certain types? Or is it kind of like you either pick one or you have to pick?
Yeah, for other things you can do, like you could just do string.
Can you load it?
Or an integer, like what if you only wanted a string or just an integer?
I don't think you can limit it. Okay. And then in here we're building what the edit screen is going to look like. And we're actually going to play in here in a minute. And then we have our task, which is our object for what the task looks like. So if we come over here and we come in here, test, test, and we'll have the priority of low. If we come here, save it, and it's saved. And I didn't go through and I didn't want to do swipe. Swipe can get annoying. So I just have long press for deleting and just single tap for editing. So I can come in here and I could edit if I wanted, or I can delete. But if you notice, let's make this big, sorry. The padding is really off right here. So let's go ahead and fix that. And this will give us a chance to show off the hot reload. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this column padding, if I remember correctly. And then we're going to do column. I might have done it backwards. Sorry. Nope. One second.
I think it's padding, and then there's
Yeah.
padding property.
Oh, I remember now what it is. Okay. So we come in here, we do padding. And then we, inside padding, we do child. And it's going to be a column. And now we need to add that down here. And we can come up here and do padding and what was it?
Edges.
Edges, thank you. I'm going to do all, and we'll have 8. And if we had a theme, we could put the theme and have it the same everywhere. We're going to go ahead and do a reload. And if it works, and now we have padding. And we didn't have to go through that annoying build process and everything. So that is kind of the basics of Flutter. Not the most in-depth, but hopefully it's enough that if you want to start taking a deep dive into it for a side project. I found it fun. It's different. You had to think differently than normal Android, which made it fun. So, any more questions or? comments?
I have another one.
Yeah.
So I know with Flutter in the back, it's actually using like a 2D drawable to kind of, put all those views in there.
Mhm.
So it looks like material design, but it's not using the same library as Android's.
Yeah.
However, when the keyboard comes up, do you know if that is calling the Android keyboard and it's actually putting that, native view on top of the Flutter and Flutter's background at that point? Or is that also another one of those things that it can do all by itself?
To my knowledge, that is the regular keyboard.
It is. Okay.
To my knowledge.
So, all right. So I'm just going to guess now that that's kind of cool, because what that means is that my view on the top piece is drawn by some other different engine than the engine that's actually drawing the keyboard on the bottom.
Yeah, Flutter has their own graphics engine that is running and building it all. And that's how some have compared it to a game engine.
But it wouldn't have to work that way in that on Android, your keyboard is part of your OS, or a separate app, as opposed to your app. We don't write a keyboard for our app, right? And if you had it in Flutter, it would be analogous to that, but we'd write the keyboard in our app, not taking advantage of the system apps.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to be able to do that. It's just that I guess I'm kind of surprised to see two different engines rendering on the same screen. So that's kind of cool.
Can you run this? Do you have a simulator you can run this with?
Yeah, I could see if I could build it up. It might not.
Yeah.
I didn't add the Firebase parts
Okay.
for
I mean, even
the
just
iOS part.
anything. I mean, I'd love to see
But-
that.
We just see a fab.
I'd love to see the hot reload between the two of them, at
Yeah.
the same time. I know you might not have done that, but that would
Let's
be
see
super
which
interesting to me.
window it's going to open up in.
Yeah.
Yeah, even app code, which is. like-
So you have to have two different emulators running so you can see it on the iOS and the Android?
App code just trying to.
Yeah, you.
Okay.
mistakes.
So you're going to have a simulator. Whoops. Okay.
They could do it, but
Let's hope it opens down here. Yeah. Okay.
they don't way too much. So there's-
1 second while I get a simulator up.
That's really rough. Think about that. It's been working on 3 months now. That's so funny. Android was 3 hours. Apple's been 3 months. It's a nightmare. Absolute nightmare.
What kind of simulator are you using?
That one right there is a Pixel 2. Oh, sorry, the emulator. Simulator will be whichever one Xcode pops up for me.
Okay.
I've actually yet to test on a simulator, so we're going on an adventure. What?
You might have to download it still.
No, I have Xcode and everything on my computer.
Don't make too big of a deal out of it. It's something that would just be interesting to
Yeah,
see those.
and I'm interested too. It'd be fun. So
That would be the selling point for an easy app is, hey, here's hot reload on both devices at the same time.
Yeah.
So I've had a couple friends that do contracting, like by themselves, and he switched over to using Flutter for apps that are doing cross-platforms because it really provides, out of all the cross-platform technologies, the cleanest setup or system for it.
yeah, it's Flutter. Other than the few hiccups that I ran into when just like getting it all set up, but once I got it set up, it's super easy and clean.
Yeah, so you can see how this compares with Xamarin.
Okay, so
Does anyone know
things like Flutter does?
if Google has put out any apps, like in the App Store, that are built on top of Flutter?
Google I/O app last year was on Flutter.
It was.
The entire I/O app was for both iOS and Android.
Nice way to promote it.
Yeah, they were promoting it big time last year.
Did they do something with Kotlin native or was it?
That was
Kotlin.
Kotlin,
They did all.
which is interesting because the Android team, they recommend if you really want to do that, use Kotlin native over Flutter, which is kind of fun.
That's cool.
oh, anyways, I will figure it out, and next time I can show you guys.
Sure.
Cool, so,
That would be awesome.
yeah. So, thank you, and